Hey, everybody. Thanks for being here with us today, and welcome to another Sales Hacker webinar. Really excited that you're giving us some of your time today, and we hope it's extremely valuable for you. I'm Colin Campbell, I'm the general manager at Sales Hacker. I'm just playing host today. We're going to talk about how to create and maintain, really, through scale, through opening new offices, as your team grows, create a winning sales culture that grows with you. So there's lots of things that people, I think, overlook, the really healthy startup sales group mentality. And then as you grow, things seem to get left behind and some things get overlooked. So we're going to try to get into some of that today and how to keep it alive, how to keep that winning momentum feeling going. What we want to do, because you're here with us live today, and if you're watching the recording, that's okay, but I hope you come to a live version sometime. If you've been with us live before, you know this. If this is your first one, know that we take your time very seriously. We know that you're busy, you've got a lot going on. So because you're here with us, we want to make sure you get the value you want to get out of this time. So to help us give that to you, please go down to the bottom of your Zoom window right now and open up the chat. We're going to keep an eye on this throughout our whole conversation. I will make sure if you ask a question that we get you a good answer. But I also want you to talk to each other, make some connections, make some friends, feel free to have side conversations. Can you start by introducing yourself? It'll help us to know what your role is, maybe your industry, your company, or where you're from, maybe your favorite sandwich. If y'all know me, mine's a peanut butter and jelly. I keep it classic, but I do go with apple jelly rather than raspberry or grape. So while you're introducing yourselves, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the folks we're talking to today. So first up, we've got Dave Bentham. He's the inside sales director at Cognism. Aptly for the conversation today, based in the UK and recently have opened up offices in the United States. So kind of on the top of the mind for David is, how do we keep the sales culture alive? How do we make sure it's a winning culture? Dave, welcome, and thanks so much for joining us today and sharing some of your experience.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. I just read Daniel at the bottom and then it threw me off. Yeah, thanks, Colin. Really good to be here. Yeah, I'm actually as interested as I think many of the viewers on kind of, how to build that winning culture in the States. But hopefully I can add some value through some of my mistakes and successes as well to everyone. So yeah, really good to be here.
Oh, we're excited to have you. We've also got Mark Kozaglo. Mark Kozaglo is VP of Sales at Outreach. If I'm not wrong, Mark, first sales hire back in 2014. So has really been around for pretty much all the growth at Outreach. Now we're at 900 employees, offices all over the place. So there's a lot of cool stories to tell there, I'm sure, too. Thanks for being here, Mark, and welcome.
Yeah. No, first employee, trying to figure out why they don't fire me every day. So, I stuck around.
You're still wondering. We're not wondering. We know why. Also, quick welcome to the folks in the chat. Michael, Daryl, John Hunter, somebody from Kuwait. That's very cool. Hi, Thomas. Dakota's here, Director of Client Relations at PKIG in Michigan. Always a really cool group. Thanks for introducing yourselves. Like I said, drop some questions in there. Let's just set the stage really quick. Before we get into how you create and maintain a winning sales culture, I'm going to just ask first, what does a winning sales culture look and feel like to you? And David, I'll ask for your answer. If you've got different thoughts in the chat, feel free to drop them in, folks.
Yeah, so really interesting question. I think it'd be really easy to answer this with loads of cliches involving, a bunch of people that are smashing target by 200% every single month, and just everybody's celebrating everybody's success all the time. I think really what I think a winning sales culture we need to be thinking long term. And if I think about, I'm going to use the example of soccer or football in the UK. There's only one team ever that's gone for a whole season winning every individual game in a season. Actually, nobody's ever gone every season, like the whole season, winning every game. But so you're going to come across some wins and losses. And I think actually a lot of the time it's about kind of where the culture really stands out of a winning culture is how people react to those losses, or how individuals and how the team reacts to when things are going wrong. Colin, we just had a conversation about feedback loops and how important they are. And, like, I think certainly when you're building a sales culture, which is what we're talking a lot about at the moment, there's no way you're going to get it right first time. And it is that iterative process, from getting things wrong in the short term. But I think the better that you can react and build processes and plans to fix those mistakes and quickly and create the right structure around that, the easier it is to create that environment where you're, over the long term, you're consistently delivering way above target and ultimately winning against your competitors and the market. So,
John, I love that. I think Dakota is echoing you in the chat that consistency is what they'd like their sales team culture to look at. And there's that famous saying, you don't want to get good enough at something to the point where you can do it right. You want to get so good you can't do it wrong. So there's that, that it sounds like that's really what you're looking for, is consistency of outcome in a healthy winning sales culture.
Yeah, right? Sure. One of my colleagues is actually a former Marine, so it's the equivalent of the SEALs in the US. And I think he's told me once that when you're in the heat of battle, you're more scared to not follow your training and the processes, and that's, I suppose, part of it, right? Like having such a strong culture and like knowing exactly what you should be doing when, that you're almost like you would never think of doing anything differently. So, and that creates that consistency. I think that was a really interesting conversation that I had with him, and just a general principle that we try and run here.
That's fascinating. Yeah, but my dad is a veteran, and he jokes that even at his age, and he's retired, he still has a standard operating procedure for every single thing he does, because he's addicted to the consistency and the control. Mark, what about you? What are the signposts you look for in a winning sales culture, and how do you know if you have one?
Yeah, so I think that you have to really separate something, because you can easily conflate winning culture. There's winning, which is people doing well, winning deals, making money. And there's a winning culture, which is a culture that creates winners. And you can be winning and have a loser culture. You can never lose if you have a winning culture. And what a winning culture is people have the belief, they have the support, and they understand how to win in a clear and easy way. And so if you want to create a winning culture, it's simple. Have and populate your team with other winners, of people with positive mindset, people that have an abundance philosophy, not one of lack and of too little. My territory is too little, the product's too hard, there's too many competitors. Like, you can never have a winning attitude if that's an undertone. You got to attract people like that. Then you have to make sure that you release that positivity. And then you have to make sure that you translate it into processes and systems that give people a chance to win. And so, like, to me, a winning culture is a little bit absent of, is a little less reliant on winning and more reliant on what you have in place that gives a chance of, gives a person a chance to win.
That's really interesting. Maybe not quite the same, but one of the things that Daryl in the comments said that feels similar to me is that one of the indications he's looked for is when sales teams start self-coaching, kind of fixing their own challenges and then communicating the fix to others, that the winning culture and the good leadership maybe means that they're actually less reliant on leadership to have that happen. Interesting stuff.
Yeah, listen, if the leader has to lead you to winning, then what you have is you have a very dependent, codependent environment. And if your manager has to get on a call for you to win a deal, if your VP has to get on a call for you to win a deal, like, you're never going to grow past 10 reps, or you're going to have a very systemically broken sales culture. The idea is for people to become self-reliant on themselves and to have the initiative and the know how to and where to go find how to get better. And like, if you can create that atmosphere, yeah, you're going to win, right? People will find their way to victory. People will find their way into deals. But when everything is relying on, well, hey, we're just going to get Colin on the phone and he's going to help us close out this deal. Like, you're in a very tenuous situation.
Yeah, 100%. And I've put myself there before, so that made me a little uncomfortable because I feel like you're like looking into the crystal ball and seeing my past, Mark. One of the mistakes I made. And so actually I spoke with both of you about this at separate times, was that culture can be a kind of a trickle down of leadership style or leadership personality. Dave, you gave a great little anecdote about way back in the day when you used to run a door-to-door sales team. Can you talk a little bit about how that felt and looked like for you back then?
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, that was the first time that I really saw it. You know, my first sales management experience was running 12 commission only door-to-door guys and girls. And it was just so obvious very quickly that if I woke up and I was in a great mood and I was really feeling it, that the team would do well. It would just reflect in the numbers. And I think perhaps for anybody that's newer to sales management, you know, like your impact is so much greater than you ever imagine. I think the best way of thinking about that is, you know, if you remember I pretty much remember everything that my manager says, right? Even the little things that they might say in a bar or, you know, a pub off the cuff, right? That's the impact that you have on people. And yeah, so as a result, I really believe that teams are just a byproduct of the character of their managers. I'm quite gritty. I think like probably one of my weaknesses is systemizing things in a simple form. I think that's something that I'm learning as we scale. But certainly my strength is my grit and, like, you know, my determination. I think that's reflected in the team, that actually, you know, sometimes I make some systems that are a little bit more confusing, but they have the grit and the will to kind of convert that around and hopefully ride it through me. I mean, I can't speak for them, but that's what I'd like to think anyway. But yeah, like, yeah, you know, it's something that I truly believe is the team are just a byproduct for you. You've got to be conscious of it though. And for me, one of the main ways you've got to be conscious of it is during the hiring process. It's really easy to just hire people that are like you, and, you know, have all the same traits as you. And I think something that I really believe in is being smart about and self-analyzing and recognizing the culture of your team and how you might need to shift it, maybe at different times during the process. I think I'm now trying to hire more people that are more systematic and cover those gaps, because it's become more obvious as we've scaled. So I think yeah, there's a lot that you can do to decide the culture of your team overall.
Interesting. That is one of the things that was the first on my mind, was like the aspect of control and intentionality. Because like you say, back in the day, when I was also a sales manager, which is a good thing I'm not anymore, I wasn't very good at it. I was okay. I noticed as well that winning seemed to beget winning, and not doing well begat not doing well. More of that, more of the same. And I could never figure out quite where to exercise actual control, or where to, you know, use my intentionality and develop a culture that could be a little bit more consistent. Mark, do you have anything to add there? Any tips for me, my past self?
Yeah, sure. I mean, listen, does winning beget winning and losing beget losing? Of course, right? But the reason that there's sales leaders is so that losing can beget winning, and winning doesn't beget losing, right? If it takes winning to do more winning, then you don't need a sales leader. You just need winners. And so the job of a sales leader is to change a winning culture to a higher performing culture, a more efficient culture, to change a losing culture from a winning culture. You have to be able to change. Like, to me, the definition of a leader is efficacy, the ability to affect change. You have to change someone's mindset, change someone's behavior, change somebody's tactics, change how somebody thinks about things. And like, if you can't change, then you can't be, if you can't affect change, you can't be a leader. So yeah, like winning does beget winning, but like any crappy sales leader can do that. Only the good sales leaders can change it from winning to winning better or from losing to winning.
Daryl had a good question here. What do you guys feel about pairing losers with winners for guidance and some kind of like buddy / mentorship system, or maybe there's a check-in or office hour, some kind of structure where you try to get one-to-one pairings between reps, a winner kind of teaching somebody who's having struggles how to do it better.
Yeah, I think my comment on it would be, so we have a mentor-mentee scheme within our sales team, which I think is super powerful and effective. So essentially, like we have an SDR, BDM, AM function, and every BDM AE and account manager has been through the SDR function, so they know the job. So we pair kind of SDRs with AMs and AEs just from a mentor-mentee type situation, and we do deliberately put we try and be strategic and put AEs that have particular characteristics with SDRs that are perhaps lacking in those characteristics. I think that's a similar point. I'd like to think that I just try and never hire in losers, or if I do, then if I've recognized them as a pure loser, then maybe you want to think about moving them out pretty quick. But certainly if there are elements, on Mark's point of taking responsibility for changing the way people are acting, I think that's one way that you can help yourself is you can definitely create a stronger relationship between two people who complement each other in their strengths and weaknesses, for sure.
Colin, can I answer this question by going back
Please.
to one of Michael's questions?
Yeah, please.
So I'm gonna show my screen here. Can y'all see this little 2x2 grid?
Yeah.
So I recently did a LinkedIn post about this, and this is how I'd answer this question so Michael's question is, top performers don't follow process that much. How do you deal with that? It's really simple. And this is the answer. All right. And this tells you how to pair what winners that you can pair losers up with. Is if you look at success, which is on the left-hand side, you get bad or good results. And on the bottom, you look at how you get them, which is your way or the exec's or company's way. What you're going to find is if you get bad results and you're doing it your way, you're going to get fired. All right. Because nobody's going to come save you and figure out how your way can work. Like, it's just not worth the investment. If you get great results, if you're a high performer, but you're doing it your way, you know what? You are risky. And you know why? Because you usually don't know what you're doing to win. Nobody knows how you're winning. Your manager and leaders can't coach you. You can't use the data because it's not consistent with how everybody's doing things. And so you're kind of in risky world, like, why go there? Now, if you do things my way, the exec's way, the company's way, and you get bad results, whose fault is that? That is the company's fault. And the company needs to invest in you and coach you and show you how to do things. And if you do things my way and you get good results, guess what? You get promoted. Because now you become the kind of top performer that I pair bottom performers with. I don't pair bottom performers with top performers that are like the greatest freestylists of all time. Because guess what? They have a way of winning that is unique to them. We have a person on our team that's kind of like this right now. And he is the best psychological seller I've ever seen in my life. He can say things that no other seller can say. And it's not fair for me to put a low performing, not as much self-confidence person with that person because they can't sell like him. But what I can do is I can put him with my Ryan Jander, who follows the process and has been one of our top AEs for 3 or 4 years running. And he runs everything to the rule and he gets the predictable results. And he's an advocate in everything that we do. I give him people to mentor all day long. And then eventually, when Jander decides at some point he wants to become a leader, he's going to be on the track to be a leader. And so, like, it's very simple is, should you put losers and winners together? Yes, but you better put them with the right winners that'll show them how to win. And this was like a lesson I've learned early in my sales career. I went out in my first outside sales job, and I signed all these contracts and a ton of them canceled. And I ended up doing just okay, not unbelievably, which I should have done. And I went the next year to all the best reps and I said, what are you doing? How are you doing it? And I learned from them. And then I went home and I was like, you know what? This is wrong. I should change this. I could do this better. This isn't smart enough. And without even trying what they told me, I was already improving on it. Like I was some kind of genius and savant. And guess what? I flamed out. Like it didn't work. And so I had this one guy stand up to me the next year. His name was Rene Ulloa. And he's this big 6'6", 280-pound former D1 offensive lineman. He put his finger on my chest. He goes, Cosaglo, quit being so smart and just do it how I'm telling you to do it. And I was like, okay, you're the man. I'll do it. Maybe I was scared. Maybe I trusted him. I don't know. But what ended up happening, Colin, was I did it exactly how he did it. And I had my best year ever. And I did it the same way the next year. And then in the second and third year, I started to see the holes. I started to understand. I didn't replicate all the mistakes he'd already made. I started to create some new efficiencies. And I eventually did really, really even better because I figured out what the holes were. And so like that's where process gets you. I believe that great sales reps that don't follow process are a disaster waiting to happen. And maybe they consistently prove me wrong, but I can't build a winning culture in a sales org on savants, geniuses, and one-offs. I need to build it on being able to hire average people and manage them to a superlative process and give them superlative support so they get unbelievable results. That's how you build a winning culture in a scalable process. Sorry for the long answer.
No, I'm in love with everything you just said, and thanks for sharing that. I'm curious, do you share that 4x4 with your teams?
Yeah.
Is that like an internal? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat. I have a LinkedIn post that I've done on it as well. So
can I ask you a question on this? Sorry, Colin, because that's really interesting. Because I think I agree completely with what you just said, Mark, in terms of that's the reality for a rep, right? Like for for an individual sales rep, that's their reality. But I suppose from a management standpoint, like how do you then a lot of the best ideas from our team in terms of how to evolve our sales processes have come from those risky individuals, right? That do stuff and we recognize that actually they're doing things a little bit differently and it's working, and we need to switch the process to match to marry up with theirs. I mean, you might tell me, obviously outreach is at a very different stage to Cognizant, where we're a Series B organization. We have about 50 sales reps, but so maybe it's a scaling thing. But yeah, I'd just be interested to hear, like, how do you generate the same ideas that are going to improve by kind of, but force everybody to follow the same process?
First of all, the way the brain works is it's lazy. It wants to conserve glucose. It doesn't want to think about things hard. And what you just said, Dave, is an example of that. It's a story that makes sense, but where is the data that backs it up? And honestly, if you go look across the internet, you're not going to find it. And this is what I would say is, early on in outreach, what made my reps successful was copying what my best reps did. And you know why it worked? Because they were confident it worked, not because it was better than what they were doing. They went from something they were doubting to something they were confident in because it was working, it was winning. And the confidence is what made it work, not necessarily the words or the technique. And so I'd argue half the time that you don't need someone innovating and out there on the lead. You just need to have confidence in what you're already doing, and that will get you a lot of the results that you're looking for. Now, having said that, you do need a couple canaries in the coal mine. You need a couple people, but you have to do it in a structured way. Like me saying to Riley Devine, the best seller I've ever had and ever worked with in my entire life, yo, Riley, go try this out. Or how are you thinking about this, Riley? And looking at that and getting him to do it consistently and then bringing it back to my org is much differently than having my top 10 people all out there doing their own things and every rep scrambling to try to copy which one that they like best and which one has the best personality, right? And so like there's a way to control the experimentation that makes it super valuable and lets you kind of see what's going to work and what doesn't, that you can bring back to the rest of your org. But you can't, for me at least, and even early on at outreach, the kind of like, let's just go at it approach just doesn't work. And it really, really doesn't work In process-driven roles like SDR, that role is a machine. It's 90% machine and 10% art. The AE role is a little bit more art, a little less machine, but it's still way more machine than people think it is. And so like you have to just kind of balance what roles you're looking at, but having a ingrained way and a few reps that you trust to be a couple steps ahead versus just letting that happen because of winning is two very different ways of looking at it.
So it sounds like, you know, from the folks in the chat and hearing from you two, the thing that everybody's gravitating towards when we talk about winning culture is consistency. How do you measure that? I mean, aside from saying, you know, we hit our goal retroactively, aside from saying retroactively, look, I can see that we have been consistent. Is there a way you can have, like, what's a leading indicator for consistency? If you're at the start of the quarter and things are feeling shaky, what are the metrics you look at?
Dave?
Yeah, look, I'm a big believer in like whatever your input is creates your outputs. And there's going to be some natural fluctuations in sales, right? Kind of going back to Mark's point. If I go to SDR world, you can make 100, if I make 100 calls, there is the chance that every single one of them doesn't pick up the phone, right? Like, and I just don't get a single connect because that's just the odds game. My best friend is a professional poker player, and I often compare the SDR world to his job. There is, if I played him at poker today, for one hand, there is a chance that I win that. I just get dealt the best cards. But in the long term, he will steal all of my money, and I will have to remortgage my flat. So, yeah, I think. Big believer in inputs, the obvious ones, all of those activity metrics, how many calls they're making, how much that stuff they're throwing out there. We've got to be looking at CRM admin, like if they're slacking on those kind of things, they're probably slacking on other things. Anything that you can record in terms of the day-to-day of them doing their job, and then just setting minimum benchmarks, right? What is the minimum expectation for me as a leader in terms of what they should be doing? And if they drop below it, then I need to hold them to account for those metrics, right? And that's how we're going to get predictability and consistency in outcomes from my perspective.
Yeah, as Dave says, there's kind of like two areas. There's the process of the process, like I want you to make so many calls. I want you to do this. We know that if you do this much effort, you're going to get this much output. And those things, you just have to have your baseline metrics and understand your business. There's the art part too. And to understand how to manage that, because there is no metric to look at that, you have to understand how a sales org is designed and how it works. The frontline manager is the most important person in the entire sales organization. That interaction between leadership, that bridge, that connection between leadership and how the frontline operates makes or breaks every sales leader that there's ever been. And basically what happens is that person is the guardian of process. And what they let reps get away with is how our organization will operate. So can I look at a metric and say, am I running things the way that they want to be, or I want them to be run? No. But can I go to a one-on-one with a manager and see that they're running the prescribed type of one-on-one the way that we want it run, or running their own thing? Yes. Can I look at the next steps on an opportunity and see, do those next steps marry to our sales process roadmap, or are they often left field? Are they status updates? And so there's things that I can check along the way. But the main thing is you have, in order for you to make sure that process is king, your frontline managers have to believe that their success is built on holding people to the process. And until you win the hearts and minds in that area, you'll never do it. It doesn't matter what metric you are. It doesn't matter how much of a slave driver you are, or how much of a carrot person you are versus a stick person. You'll never get to the point where you can get your reps to do what you want to do until your frontline managers believe in their hearts and minds that it's what the reps should be doing.
I think sorry, Colin, I think one practical thing I could just add is we at Cognizant we have what we call the failure dashboard, which is essentially every individual salesperson has just a dashboard that highlights anything where it goes slightly off the process. And just a really easy thing we did when we started working from home, which I'm sure lots of people have started doing, is every stand-up or once a week we have a stand-up where everybody shares their screen and they show that dashboard, and if anything's off, everybody knows it, right? So and it just fixed the problem straight away. Nobody moves away from that process. So yeah, just something to think about.
Hey, Colin,
One of the things. Go ahead, Mark. Sorry.
From Dakota. I said there's a good question from Dakota about confidence to kind of tie out what we were talking about a couple minutes ago, and how do you help build confidence? So I'll put another link to it in there. I did a post on this recently too. So listen, building confidence is super simple, but it's not easy. What I mean by that is when I tell you what it is, you're going to go, yeah, duh. But actually doing it takes discipline, practice, and self-control. And so the way that you instill confidence in someone is to help them realize they already have every answer they need. And what most leaders do is they give answers, which shows the rep they don't have the answers, and they never get the confidence that they do. When you show a rep that they already have the answers inside of them, they all of a sudden become more confident because they see, I can figure it out. And so the tactical way of doing that is, rather than when a rep says, what should I do in this deal, is you turn it around, and instead of giving them an answer, you ask them a question. What do you feel like you should do in this deal? What does the sales roadmap say you should do next in this deal? What did you do in the last deal when you got to this point? How would you think about getting on the horn with someone if they were in your shoes and they were trying to get in touch with you? And like, it's unleashing that kind of creativity in people and helping them understand that 99% of the time they already know the answer. They're just not asking themselves the right questions or surfacing that answer the right way. Our job as leaders is never to give the answer, is to create questions in space that allow a person to realize they have the answers inside of them. You do that over time, and a rep all of a sudden will come to you and be like, hey, I'm doing this, I'm going to do this, this is going to work. If this doesn't work, I'm going to try this. This is over here, something I'm trying, something new, is kind of cool. What do you think of it? And you'll get that kind of confidence and that momentum forward, versus, hey, I'm stuck in these 3 deals. Like what am I supposed to do? Like, even when I say it, I can feel the difference in my own like emotional state, my own mental state, when I'm like, I don't know what to do. I feel defeated. I don't feel confident. I feel like I'm scrambling in the dark. And when a rep's like, I don't know what to do, but I got some ideas on what I could do, then all of a sudden it changes how they think about it. And so inspiring confidence is simple. Ask people questions, show them that they already know the answer, but it's not easy. You have to be really self-disciplined and make sure they actually don't have an answer before you give them one.
Love that. Love it. If you don't mind, I want to shift gears just a little bit and talk about celebrating wins. I think when a lot of people think about winning culture, they think about things like spiffs, the Slack group where you give people shout outs. And so I know that I feel the contention, or maybe that's not the right word, but I can feel Mark sort of bristling already. Mark, do you have tips, tricks? Like what would you recommend that people use to celebrate wins and things like that, to make the culture of winning feel felt throughout the team?
So I'm going to say something hard here, and it's meant to be more of a challenge and a chance for you to think and reflect than it is me being an a-hole. So take it in that direction, right?
I'll take it. Yeah.
That's great. If you're a leader and you have to ask someone, how should we celebrate wins? You shouldn't be a leader. And this is a simple thing. How would you want to be celebrated as a leader? Go ask a couple of your reps, like, what makes you feel fulfilled? What makes you feel recognized? What makes you feel connected? And so, like, listen, every deal over $10,000, which is a whole lot of deals at Outreach, I send the person an individual Slack that is personalized for them, that says something to them, that social, and lets them know, like, I'm just in their corner and I got it. Is that right for everybody? No. But you know what? That feels good to me. So that's what I'm going to do. Right? And is it right for everybody? Probably not. Some people probably want me to send out a big email to the entire company. Some people want to be recognized in an all hands. And you know what? We do some of that stuff too. But listen, like there's no shortcut to this answer. Celebrating wins and having that culture of, appreciation for hard work is a decision on an intentionality. And there's basically no wrong answer. Like don't ask the question, how should I celebrate? Just decide how you're going to do it and then be consistent and intentional and mean it. Because the worst thing that you can do is say, I'm going to celebrate stuff, and then you're sending out fake ass emails that everybody knows that you just sent a template and it doesn't matter. It does the exact opposite effect. Like just pick something, be intentional and mean it, and then it'll work. I'm telling you. And, honestly, at outreach, sometimes we've had trouble here. We get so into what we're doing, so focused on the prize, so interested in like, okay, we did that. Great. Now what's the next thing? That we have really had to slow down and say, how are we going to make sure that reps feel connected? How are we going to make sure that they feel celebrated and appreciated for the unbelievably hard job that they do and the awesome wins that they create with their own genius? And so that's something that we've really become intentional about. But I think that as a leadership team, my sales leadership team, we really do feel that way, and it's not fake. And so it almost doesn't matter what we do, because we're going to do something and it's going to be with our heart, and that's what people can feel.
Dave, anything to add there?
I mean, I agree with Mark for sure. I think just thinking as well about like how, it's a man management play. Like how does each rep, ideally, how does each member of your team want to be celebrated, and recognizing that it's different for each and every single person. My first manager, I can remember there was 2 times ever that he said anything positive to me, and one of I can literally remember receiving those 2 texts. One said good job and the other said you did well, and they were like when I broke the records, like 2 of the longest standing records, right? And that's all I got from him. But that's how he used to manage me, and it worked really, really well for me. But for others, he was throwing their name up in lights all the time, right? And I think I've got members of my team who I celebrate every single win with, and I've got members of my team where they know that I'm gonna celebrate with them, but I'm gonna celebrate once they've hit their target, done their job, and then they're over exceeding, because like that's gonna get the best out of them individually. So I think if you're not directly managing salespeople, making sure your managers know that as well is a really important factor.
Yeah, Dave is so right. If you're a frontline sales manager, your job is to understand each person on your team and what it takes for them to feel connected and celebrated, and you need to do that. If you're second line or third line or whatever, as you move up, it's impossible to know that. So you just have to do what feels right for you and make sure that it's consistent and intentional.
Interesting. I like that distinction between frontline and second or third line. That's helpful. Let's talk about, as we scale, some of the things that get dropped or maybe are prone to being left behind in culture. Because Mark, I think you told me you feel pretty strongly that outreach, for the most part, has done a good job of keeping the healthy bits of the culture alive as we've grown to nearly 900 employees now. What do you think? How did we do that?
Yeah, so I still remember when we sat in one of our meeting rooms called Mad Max. It was in the Brooks building, which is the flagship store of Brooks Running Shoes. It's on the 2nd floor. And we walk in there to talk about what are our corporate values. And we sat in with this distinguished moderator named Sarah Inbach. She's on our board. She was the first COO of LinkedIn early on. She's invested in so many successful companies. And she sat us down and she said, all right, everybody, this is going to take us 2 to 3 days. And we were all strapped in, ready to like really figure this out. 3 hours later, we walked out of there with the pillars of our culture. And she's like, I can't believe that y'all did it. How did you do it that fast? And it was really simple. Is we kind of, as a leadership team at that time, understood who we were, and we doubled down on who we were. And we didn't try to create people that we weren't and aspired to be and tried to move into that. And so one reason that outreach continues to be so grounded in our values, and new employees constantly say, well, listen, this is the first company where I actually hear the values talked about, and not just to bring up the values for the value's sake, but because it's part of how we work and how we operate and how we think. It's really simple. It's like, we grounded ourselves. We were confident enough to say who we are and what we represent is enough if we double down, trust on it, and are confident in it. And so that was our corporate values. And we didn't say, well, listen, we really wish we could be this. And the next thing you know, everybody's trying to figure out how to be something that they're not, so they can say that they're aligned with the values. And so I think that that's how you do it, is look as you're creating that culture. And it could be your own individual sales team's culture. It can be your sales org's culture. It could be your marketing org, so your company org culture. You got to align and double down on what you are, right? Because what you are got you to where you are. And not that you don't want to grow and add and all that, but like double down on who you are. Have a little confidence and trust in yourself. And like that, if you do that, you'll have no problem being who you are. Right. But when you try to create something that you're not, that's when it gets a little weird. And all of a sudden everybody's talking about values because nobody's living them.
Dave, anything else to add there? I mean, I know you mentioned recently opened some offices, or maybe an office, I'm not sure, in the United States, and had a few lessons learned there. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So I think we so I suppose we've got kind of 40 sales reps here in the UK, and I think we made the decision after our Series B funding to move out and open the office in New York. I think we did what a lot of companies do in that situation, and we took some people that were used to our culture here in the UK, and we sent them out to New York to set up the culture there. And I think one thing that we very quickly learned was that actually there is going to be a lot of differences if you are going to make those international switches, and actually you might not be able to perfectly mirror your culture in different countries. At the way you approach sales in the US is very different, or not very different, but there are differences compared to the UK. We've recently opened up offices in Germany to service DACH, the DACH region. That's a totally different ball game, I'll tell you that. US and DACH are on, everybody turns up to a meeting, nobody drops out. If they say yes to a meeting, they're there, right? So, there is like some fundamental differences. And I think recognizing that first and foremost is really important. And perhaps something that we made a mistake of is that we felt like we could do exactly the same thing. And yeah, I think one thing that's very important when building out new offices, and one thing we've recognized is your management, your frontline leaders, as Mark was talking about earlier, and like who they are, and them having the belief in the company's core values, but just also being the right people to build the system up. I think you talked about scalability, or like scaling. I think culture does change as you scale. I think there's no denying that. I personally think it's very difficult to hold to keep the same culture as you scale. It's certainly not what we found. And but I think, again, like recognizing that, accepting that, we do an exercise on like a yearly basis where we take the sales team, we put them in a room, or like a Zoom room nowadays, and we get them to write down the things that they believe in, and the values that they want to hold each other accountable for. So almost like their own like rules. And it's a really interesting exercise, and it's always been very positive. They've always kind of basically aligned with the company's overall values. But it's a really good way of holding the team to account. So yeah, that's just an idea for anybody.
I love it. Thanks. All right, we've got about 15 minutes left. We don't necessarily have to stretch to fill the full hour, but there are a few questions from attendees in the community here I'd love to get to. If you still have a question or two, folks, feel free to drop it in the chat. Michael Phelan with the amazing questions this whole time. I got to send you a hoodie or something, Michael. Michael asked, do the best sales leaders live in Salesforce, metrics and reports, or with the sales team, or maybe with customers and prospects, given what we've talked about, focus on, consistency? What do you think? Where's the best environment for a sales leader to live?
Can I say both?
You can say both.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like I think personally, I think that's all really, really important. Like I want to listen to the calls that my team are making, review them. I want to do the calls myself, right? Like I don't want to completely detach myself when I get those opportunities. If I've got time, like I want to be on the front line within reason, but I also do need to be in the metrics. It's important. I think it's really easy to see on like LinkedIn and stuff, just all of these like, the bashing of kind of Salesforce dashboards and reports and managers sitting on there all the time. But as a manager, I need to take a look at them and see how things are tracking, and they are a powerful tool for me. So yeah, I'd say all of those things are really important. I don't think it's as black. I don't think it's black and white at all. And it's I think a job as a leader is balancing your time and working out where the priorities are and where you're going to get where your time is going to be most valuable, right? And that can again change week by week, month by month, depending on what's going on. So yeah, I'd say both.
Do you think one could be an effective sales leader and spend the majority of their time in reports and in dashboards?
Well, then you know what I'm going to say to that, and I'm sure everybody knows the answer to that, right? Of course not.
Yeah.
Like you can't. You've got to do it all, and I'm sure nobody wants the sit on the fence answer. Maybe Mark's going to offer something different, but I think like obviously it's very difficult to just sit and look at numbers all day, and you shouldn't at all. But it's finding balance. It's spinning plates, right? That's the majority of managing is just spinning plates, working out what the priorities are. The best leaders often prioritize best. So
if you find yourself living in dashboards and reports because it's hugely valuable, that's a signal that you need a sales analyst. All right. Like if you are spending all your time looking at the data and finding what's going wrong, that means you're not spending any time fixing it. And you need a new role in your sales work of someone to go find you the problems. My job as a sales leader isn't necessarily to find the problems, it's to solve the problems. And the easiest way for me to solve problems is for somebody else to find them and me to spend my time thinking about how to solve them and then making sure that we execute on the solution. And that's I think the answer to it is, you got to do both. But if your business is getting so specialized and the answers are getting harder and harder to find and less obvious, and there's more and more leverage you can create, you need to create someone whose job it is to figure that out.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Or hire, like, I got a super operational leader that's one of my VPs. I got a super inspirational leader that's one of my VPs. I got a super, poke holes and stuff, not pessimist, that's the wrong word, but he's like an intellectual. He's like, this and this are wrong. Like if you don't want to do it or you can't do it, then you got to find somebody on your team whose strength that is, and then cover for them in their area of weakness.
Yeah, love it. Cool. I think maybe last question at this point, another one from Michael. How do you keep your culture in tune to B2B buyer changes? Buyer behavior is changing. How do you keep your sales culture a healthy reflection of that and the right reaction to that?
Yeah, I think again, okay, maybe this is slightly controversial. I think that the best sellers kind of control the way buyers are thinking. And so I think it's again, I'm a really big believer that you've got to be really careful what you see on LinkedIn, in terms of like exactly what to do in sales, because people, it can be quite polarizing, and one day everybody's telling you never to that discovery should be 1 minute long, and then the next is like just discover for a whole demonstration, right? And I think you've got to be really careful to do that. I think you can be ear to the ground in the sense you can take the feedback from prospects, see how, look at, analyze the calls and the demos and the opportunities that are not working out, and see if there's any any links in that process. But I don't think that I mean, from my shorter sales experience, and maybe that's why I'm biased, like there's not been huge changes in how people want to buy. I did, I started this whole thing in door-to-door sales, and I know that I no longer work for that organization, but the organization is still running. They're selling to the same doors, literally the same houses, the same product, and they're still doing it today, 8 years later. And often, door-to-door is seen as a massively outdated system. So yeah, I think keep your ear close to the ground, but also don't react loads to what you see on LinkedIn as well, would also be my advice about, people that suddenly decide that cold calling is dead, or, never email anybody, or you've got to hyper personalize every email. That's the only way to be successful, right? Like, just be really careful to be led by those kind of conversations. Listen to your buyers, right? Like, listen to the actual prospects. And also, back to what Mark said earlier, like, if your salespeople have confidence in what they do, usually they'll do a great job, right? If you're, if I turned around to my team, my SDRs are doing mostly cold calling at this point, but if I turned around to them and I said, right, let's double down on emails, we're all going to personalize emails, and they did it with confidence, they'd probably be very, very effective at it as well. So that's what tends to matter more, in my opinion.
Love it. This is, a pretty good, I think, a good microcosm of the advice we're giving here today, which is, in short, if you want your teams to be intentional, you as the leader have to be intentional and thoughtful, and avoid catching onto the shiny object syndrome, or looking for a silver bullet answer. Which, I think we at Sales Hacker, we're pretty careful about trying to cultivate an environment where you can, if you need them, get actionable tips you can put into action now or tomorrow or next week, while at the same time encouraging folks to be, thoughtful and intentional, and ask why things work, and understand, rather than just act on some kind of, fleeting best practice, quote unquote best practice, that might not be good in a month. That might do it. It looks like we've answered a bunch of questions. I'm going to have to go meditate on some of the advice from both of you today. Folks, really quick shout out and just a huge thanks to our sponsor for this webinar, Cognism, changing the game. Go check out Cognism for data, but a lot of other amazing things can help you with in your efforts to grow your businesses. And like they said, new office in New York. If you're in the States, that's exciting news for you.
We're hiring in Boston right now. We're building an office in Boston. So if you are based in Boston and you want to join the boat, then also do that.
Do it. All right, great.
Reach out.
David, if people want to get in touch with you, how can they reach you? Okay, if I drop your LinkedIn in the
Of course,
chat.
LinkedIn, David Bentham, super easy. And obviously cognism.com if you're interested in kind of what we do, as Colin said, providing the best contact data internationally. And we also provide intent data as well. So if you're in the market for that kind of stuff, then check us out.
Awesome. Thanks as always to both of you, Mark and Dave. Really, really appreciate you showing up and being not just physically present, but giving us your attention and your advice and experience. So thanks for that. And of course, thanks to the audience. Y'all are always amazing. Really just love the Sales Hacker community, showing up, asking great questions, being present and learning together. Beautiful thing to witness. Appreciate you all. And I hope you have a lovely rest of your Tuesday. Take care, everybody.